I've played a pretty decent amount of Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, 20 hours of which was spent hitting trash bags with my baseball bat on Dundoko Island. And as somebody who hasn't played a lot of Yakuza games in the past, I have a lot of questions to ask. So here are at least 6 things that don't make a whole lot of sense in Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. First of all, why is everyone in such tremendously good shape? As far as I can tell, no one in these games seem to spend a lot of time at the gym. I know they all run around an entire city all day and get into plenty of exhausting fights, and I'm sure that's a decent workout on its own, but look at how ripped Ichiban is. And before you say he probably got that bod from working out in jail, Infinite Wealth takes place in 2023, 4 years after the events of Yakuza Like a Dragon. And as we see in the beginning of the game, Ichiban has been working as a contract worker at an employment center, which involves a lot of sitting down. He's also in his mid to late 40s, eats a ton of crap food, and seems to enjoy long nights of drinking and smoking, like a lot of smoking. Why is no one hacking up a lung in these games? Which actually reminds me, in Infinite Wealth, Kiryu has to be in his 60s and he has cancer, but he looks like that and he's able to do things like this. I don't know what kind of genetics these people wound up getting, but I feel like I got screwed, because if I eat a hamburger and don't run for 3 hours on a treadmill afterwards, I look like this guy. In the Like a Dragon games that star Ichiban, the conceit behind the turn-based battle system is that this is all just kind of happening in Ichiban's head. In reality, you aren't beating up outlandishly dressed bad guys in battles where everybody takes their turn, Dragon Quest style. That's just how Ichi imagines it. If that's the case, why does Kiryu's part of the story also involve turn-based battles? In the story, he breaks away from Ichiban and leads his own party. So, does that mean that Kiryu is also imagining that all of his fights are happening in turn-based battles with his team? How did that come about? Did Ichiban put this idea into Kiryu's head, and now that's just how he's viewing things when he hits somebody with a bicycle? It also makes me wonder about the whole job system too. Like, I could see why Ichiban would go into a changing room, put on an action hero costume, and suddenly think he could do martial arts. But does Kiryu also go into a changing room, put on a cowboy outfit, and fire off pew-pew bullets out of his imaginary guns at bad guys? Because I don't really see how that's possible, but I like it. Now, another question I have is about the weirdos in costumes that are everywhere in Infinite Wealth. During the battles, as I said before, Ichiban is imagining the enemies as they are. But I don't think everyone is imaginary, because then how do you explain the people that fall out of the tree that are dressed as coconuts? Or the sandcastle people who hide in the sand? Or the people who hide in the sewers? And that's a whole other thing that needs to be discussed. Why are there people in the sewers? There are just too many people who already are dressed like weirdos before the fights begin. Like the homeless people who slither around in sleeping bags like worms. These people aren't imaginary, and they seem to really dress like this in real life. And then there's the people outside of the battles who are wearing costumes. There's Mako and Gachapin on Dondoko Island, Camelop with his fortunes. There's Aloe Happy, a character so creepy that even Infinite Wealth has to call out how creepy he is. These mascots never seem to take their costumes off. They eat, they sleep, and they do not shower while they are in the costumes. Those things have to smell like death. And everyone, except for Ichiban, who initially is creeped out by these weirdos, but then just kind of accepts it, just seems to ignore that this is happening. There are just weirdos in costumes, and that's just how life is in Hawaii. And speaking of Hawaii, this game partially takes place in Honolulu, Hawaii, where you get into a lot of fights. Why is that exactly? Because from a basic Google search, aka the ultimate form of research, it seems like the crime rate in Hawaii isn't that bad statistically, and yet every street in Hawaii is filled to the brim with random dudes who want to rob, punch, and stab you. There's even a section in the game where they show you that a gang called the Barracudas patrol the streets at night in huge numbers, scaring away the cops and causing havoc. And even if the cops were around, most officers in this game are portrayed as being more corrupt than the actual crooks. And despite all of that, they still proclaim that Hawaii is a vacation destination that everyone wants to visit. And we have to talk about Sujimon because holy crap, Sujimon. Now what is Sujimon, you might ask? Well, in Infinite Wealth, there's an entire Sujimon League side quest that is basically a silly parody of Pokemon. Only instead of magical lightning mice, you control sumo wrestlers and traveling salesmen. Your Sujimon are just the enemies that you meet in battles on the street, and you gather them by beating the living crap out of them and then begging them to join your team by giving them gifts and telling them that you love them, which is a bit of a mixed message. Then, after you've acquired Sujimon, you battle in an underground fighting ring where you play coach to a team of human beings that are forced to pummel each other into submission while the wealthy elite bet on the matches. Now that seems kinda dark and disturbing, but it's played pretty light, and the Sujimon all seem pretty happy to be forced to fight against their will. Plus there's just a bunch of regular people that have Sujimon like it's just a normal thing to have a team of human beings that you force to fight. You could also take these Sujimon and make them work for you on Dondoko Island, where you can send them to the Dondoko farm, and they'll sort through trash to find you resources, plant vegetables, train, or just somehow make you more Dondoko bucks. And as far as I can tell, they aren't being paid for any of this labor. So essentially, Ichiban wanders around Hawaii attacking random thugs and then forcing them to either fight to the death or work for him on a tropical island far from the mainland. And I haven't even mentioned that some Sujimon can be recruited using a gacha machine, and when they come in, they're in prison attire with their heads covered up. What is that implying? Oh, and I'm adding this in too. You can awaken Sujimon at Sujimon stops, which means that you can take several of the same Sujimon and use them to strengthen one Sujimon. And when you do that, it says, the Sujimon used as awakening fodder will be, well, don't worry about them. It's fine. What does that mean? And if we're gonna talk about disturbing Nintendo parodies, I guess we have to talk about Sicko Snap. Infinite Wealth somehow managed to put 3 Nintendo games in as side quests without triggering Nintendo's famously litigious legal department. As I just discussed, Sujimon is legally distinct Pokemon, and then there's Dondoko Island, which is legally distinct Animal Crossing. And before I move on from that, there's so many things that don't make sense about Dondoko Island. Why does hitting trash with a baseball bat make it go away? How is Ichiban able to craft giant buildings using the resources he got from the trash? Why are there trash pirates? And then there's Sicko Snap, this game's take on Pokemon Snap. But how do you do Pokemon Snap without getting sued? Well, it's easy. You just replace the Pokemon with perverts. As explained by the guy who gives you the camera for this side quest, Hawaii has an epidemic of perverted men who run around half naked, gyrating their crotches at whomever and whatever they can. Seriously, what the hell is going on in Hawaii? So to help with the pervert pandemic, you take pictures of them while riding around on a trolley in hopes of then submitting the photos to the police to help turn in all of those perverts. 2 questions about this. First of all, is there just a section of the police department that deals with pervert photos? And second, who on the development team was the one to come up with this side quest? Because I have a feeling that everybody probably has a lot of serious questions about them. Questions that they do not want to have answered. Worst of all, the old man who gives you this side quest, who's nobly taking pictures for the cops, seems far too into this activity and even says this line of dialogue. And I think that's enough video games for one day. I could go on. There are other things that don't make sense, like, for example, the replica of the Hawaii Mall that's been built underground that houses a counterfeit designer clothing factory that is located underneath a homeless camp, or the fact that during the lemonade stand side quest, and yes, of course there's a lemonade stand side quest, you can encounter an NPC that says this line of dialogue: apple juice is king, all other fruit drinks are the devil's piss. And you know what? You gotta admire his passion. But I gotta wrap this video up at some point, so thank you for joining me on this trip through the absolute bizarre world that is Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. And for more Infinite Wealth coverage, you should check out TheGamer.com. I'm Jamie Latour, and we'll see you next time.